10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good golly, Miss Molly. Welcome to It's Only Talk and Roll with me, your host, Brian, that 70s rock fan. And thankfully, I thought I was going to be on my own today, which would have been a nightmare of epic proportions. But Pope and John have joined me. I'm so pleased to see you guys.
Saved by the montage. Gotta love it.
Saved by the montage. You had me at montage. So I spent all week watching Thin Lizzy videos, and my God, if only if it wasn't for the copyright stuff, that montage would have been 2 hours long. In fact, I wouldn't have done a show. I would just have played in montage. Nothing but that. What a magnificent band. Welcome to the show today, because we're going to dive deep or shallow, or just dive into the mighty, mighty legends that are Thin Lizzy and Phil Lynott, because that's how his name is supposed to be pronounced according to his daughters. We're going to play a little clip from them later. As I say, I'm your host. We're going to crank it up to 11 today. One of the most badass bands in rock history, Thin Lizzy, formed in Dublin, in Ireland, and I promise I'm not going to say diddly potatoes once today. I'm not going to say it. You will not hear that phrase on this show today. Irish band formed in 1969, became synonymous with hard driving melodic guitar rock with that distinctive twin guitar sound. Influenced a ton of later bands, a fusion of hard rock, some Celtic stuff thrown in, and blues. And legendary frontman in Phil Lynott. He was a poet, storyteller, as well as a kick-ass bass player and sex symbol to boot. And then a parade of top guitarists that would have made most bands, they would have killed to have even one of those guys in their band. And they had just an endless parade of them. So looking forward to this one a lot. It's one of my most formative bands of the 70s and 80s, a band that I was heavily into at the time. So I'd also like to welcome to today's show, before we say hello to the chat, our great friend Wilco from the Rock and Roll Rowdies. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm texting back and forth with health insurance, which I'm sure you know what all that's about. And
Aye.
it's just a pain in the butt. So if you see me doing like this, I'm just texting to these guys to try to work out this claim, which they haven't paid. But anyway,
Well,
yeah,
I'm glad
Phil
you could
Lynott.
make it. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you knew Phil pretty well back in the day, the old speakeasy days. So everything I've ever seen from him, I have some interview clips to play. He seemed like a lovely guy. Is
He
that
was
true?
one of the
Ren?
boys. Yeah, he was totally one of the boys. I mean, but the first person I ever met was the guitar player. His name just went.
Eric Bell?
No,
Gary Moore? Gary Moore?
Gary
Gary Moore.
Gary Moore. Yeah, I mean Gary. I met Gary when he was in Skid Row.
Yeah.
So hung out with him a lot and went to a lot of his gigs. And then he kind of disappeared for a minute, and then all of a sudden, the Rock and Roll Rowdies. We used to go into Marquee Club at 11 o'clock, meet up with all the drunks, and go to the bar. Then walk across 3 or 4 blocks to the Speakeasy. And Phil was always there, always there. He was a great chap. We drank a lot, we laughed a lot, we threw people around the streets a lot. He was one of the boys. He just loved to have a lot of fun. He never ever got out of control. He was always under control. And we just had great times. I mean, the last time I saw him was when I was flying in to do the Ronnie James Dio gig. Oh, God. And I was walking through Heathrow, and I hear, Walker, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, Phil, my old mate. I said, how's it going? He goes, I'm doing great, and there was women everywhere. There's maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000. I went, who are the old boilers? He goes, oh, they're all for me. I said, can I borrow? He was signing autographs. And just the way we were, I was like, well, can I borrow a couple for about 20 minutes? And he was like, yeah, take your pick, whatever you want.
20 minutes? 5.
And he was like, you're meeting up with Ronnie James? I was like, yeah, he's outside picking me up with Willie Fife, the tour manager. He goes, okay, well, I'm going with you. So we walk outside, and he's Ronnie and said his highs and everything else. So obviously he's outside now. So the publishing keeps trying to find him and all that. So we just laughed and carried on for about 25 minutes. And then he goes, I've got to go and do this. So off he went, back into the Heathrow airport to do his thing. But yeah, God bless him, man. I used to go drinking with him 5 to 7 nights a week. It was fantastic.
So as well as him and Gary Moore, you must have known Brian Robertson as well. He was in the Speakeasy. Well, he notoriously, as we will talk about later, hurt himself in the Speakeasy, which was a bit of an incident, but we'll come to that later.
But I can't remember the date, but I was with the Average White Band. I was living in New York, and I must have seen the ads for Thin Lizzy coming out, and they were supporting Queen in Madison Square Garden.
Posters of that, yeah.
Yeah, so I got in touch with Phil, and I went, I'll pick you up at the airport. He goes, you will? Because they didn't have much money back then. I was like, yeah, I'll pick you up in a limo. And the funniest thing about it is I picked Phil up, and Gary and everybody's looking at me. I went, see ya. And Phil and I just drove off in the limo. And we just didn't think about it until about 12 minutes later. We just started laughing.
Left them standing.
We just left them. I mean, I don't know if they were expecting me to take them or to pick them up or what the news was. And we just started laughing. I think we laughed all the way into New York because back in those days, in the 70s, Atlantic, I think, owned the Mayflower Hotel. And every band was staying there. And that's where the boys were staying. So I pull up, and Slim and Whitey, the two main guys out front, were like, Wilkie, what are you doing with him? I went, they went for Thin Lizzy. I went, no, he's a friend just popping in, So, yeah, we went to that gig that night. It was fantastic.
Yeah, they supported
and I hadn't
Queen.
seen Queen either. That was
I
good.
think that was US 77, was that? US Tour 77 or something for
It was
Queen?
Queen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Thin Lizzy supported them. They supported a few major acts in the US trying to break it. BTO and Kansas and others. But that was a big one with Queen. But I'm going to pick your brains a little bit more about that stuff, Wilco, as we go on. But right now, I just wanted to say thank you to our great friend Christian Delorme from his Revival channel. Whiskey Flowing Money. That's $5 Canadian. That's enough for one drop of whiskey, one very small drop. And something on the tip of my tongue, yes, here it is F dollar bracket K, the Bruins. I have no idea what that means. But because Pope's here, he might be able to interpret that.
I think I know it's an old code, but it checks out.
It's an old meme, but it checks out. So thank you, Christian, for keeping the channel, helping keep the channel afloat. And I must play you a clip for that. My new favorite, beats the James Brown. But also welcome to the show, obviously, Pope. How are you, buddy?
Doing good, man. Sorry I made it at the last minute, but glad to be here. Glad to be talking about this band because it's one I've been meaning to get to on my show for a while, and I never quite got around to it. So glad to be finally giving them their due.
No, I'm pleased you could make it, mate. I mean, I think after doing this for 2 or 3 years, it's well overdue that I got to Thin Lizzy, given they played such a big part of my young adulthood, childhood into young adulthood. They were a quintessential boys band, I would say. Wilco would probably back that up, but also welcome to our great friend John Swolfen. How are you, mate?
Just fine. I came squeaking in at the last second, so
You did. Are you a Thin Lizzy aficionado?
I'm a fan. I don't think I'm an aficionado. I mean, I know most of their music, but it's one of the bands I never got a chance to see.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, neither did I, although I've seen various artists involved with Thin Lizzy over the years in their own acts or solo or in other bands. But I never ever got the chance to see Thin Lizzy, and to this day, I bitterly regret that, along with a couple of other bands I didn't see at the time. But yeah, I got a warm, fuzzy glow watching all the stuff this week that I was catching up on, prepping for the show, and just realized what just a wonderful bunch they were. What a wonderful guy Phil Lynott seems to be when you see him being interviewed. I just want to say hi to everyone that's here, though. Thank you all for being here today. Over on the Rumble side, we have Parrot Head, who's apparently looking for some kind of sheep shagger. I'm not quite sure who he's talking about. And then Lord Shax is over there too. Goat Simulator 3 is out, he says. Say, I'm not a goat shagger. That's goats are repulsive. That's just horrible. That's real perversion. But over on the YouTube side, we got a lovely crowd. You're all looking very nice. Anonymous Gamer, who was in the chat last night, never mind this morning. Christian is here, obviously. David Glenn, good to see you, buddy. And Putin's cat. Thank you for being here, Putin's cat. Davina, the wonderful Davina, is here. We have D. Bud Martin, a wrench of wrenches. Thank you for being here, my friend. We mentioned Christian, of course, E. Clay Thomason, Anima Confusa. Good to see you, lass. Bill Barclay, great to see you too. If I'm missing anyone, I'm sure we'll catch up. Lord Thoth, Tina Guzman, FKHC 2005. Good to see you too. Parrothead is both here and over on Rumble, so that's quantum physics at work. Big Dave K. And as I say, if I forget anyone, forgive me. I mean, Dustin, keep it simple, and he's going to be joining us at some point. And Big Dave K has left a $2 super chat. Sorry, was that already, John? Did you already put that up?
Yeah, I put that up.
Sorry, but thank you for helping me. $2 super chat for Big Dave K. Hey, Rock Fan and Company. Just saying howdy. Well, howdy to you too. and that means we have to show you a special clip.
Get your haggis right here, chopped heart and lungs, boiled in a wee sheep's stomach. Tastes as good as it sounds. Good for what ails you. Hey,
So thanks, Big Dave. Obviously, haggis, the food of the gods, or is it the food of the dogs? It's one or the other. I can never quite get it right. So let's start talking about this wonderful, wonderful band. We're only going to cover the period really up to when they broke up in 1983. And there's been multiple reunions of remaining members since, and various combinations and tributes or whatever. I think we'll just be talking up to the point in 83 when they dissolved. I wanted to start, though, by showing on a recent last trip I made over to Europe. Here's me in Dublin standing next to the Phil Lynott statue, which is a bloody good one, I have to say. Almost as good as the Rory Gallagher stuff they've got up. But and Rory, of course, was a guy that Phil knew very well. But God, I don't know which one of us is the most handsome, really. Hard to say, isn't it?
It's a toss-up.
He's a lot taller than you.
He's a lot taller and a lot more talented. But it's a lovely tribute they've got to Phil up in Dublin there.
It's just a shame you didn't have your bass there, too. They could,
That's right. I'm sure people do that.
probably.
Yeah, so Thin Lizzy, for the uninitiated, who were Thin Lizzy? Well, Irish hard rock band formed in 1969 in Dublin, broke up in 1983, and then there was the sad passing of Phil in 86. Originally all Irish, but over the years, pretty much a multinational lineup. I mean, even in that picture there, you got a Scotsman and an American. So 12 studio albums in their lifetime, 2 live albums, multiple hit singles.
12 albums.
Yeah, in their lifetime, and then more material has come out in the years, and a lot of compilations too, of course, and some early Phil Lynott stuff from Skid Row days and so on. So there's been a steady stream of other material, but 12 and 2 live albums, of course, including Live and Dangerous, which is possibly one of the greatest live albums of all time. A lot of hits such as Whiskey in the Jar, Jailbreak, Boys Are Back in Town, the ubiquitous Boys Are Back in Town. Very popular in Ireland, obviously, but also in the UK. Huge in the UK, big live act. Not as commercially successful in the US, but hugely influential, especially when you listen to what a lot of the metal bands of the 80s and 90s say and songs that they cover, especially that twin guitar sound, which is totally distinctive and recognizable. And they were a big concert draw worldwide. As I say, Alive and Dangerous, one of the greatest rock live albums ever. Beloved of metal, new wave of British heavy metal and punk bands. They had a bit of a punk love affair going on too, which we'll also get to later in the show. But how did the band get their name Thin Lizzy? Well, I found a nice little article by drummer Brian Downey, who explains this is his story about how they got the name. And he was there because he founded the band with Phil. And he'd known Phil since before those days in various show bands that they had. They had these Irish show bands, which they would play pop tunes and traditional stuff as well. And he befriended him. I think they were schoolmates even, and befriended each other. Wow. And there's a lovely picture of them.
Wow, look at that.
Look at that beautiful picture. There must have been 14 or something.
That's beautiful.
Got the school uniforms on and everything or whatever. And, already Brian Downey was drumming, and Phil at that time was a vocalist. And he asked Phil if his band could open for Brian Downey's band could open for them. And he said, yeah. But he said when it came to the name Thin Lizzy, it was originally guitarist Eric Bell who came up with it. We were throwing around ideas for a name after rehearsal one day, and Eric suggested Thin Lizzy, which was a character in children's comic magazine The Dandy. Now, you'll remember The Dandy, Wilco.
Yeah.
Me too. And
I never read it.
No, I did because it was.
I looked at the pictures.
You looked at the pictures, yeah. Well, you don't read comics, do you? You just look at the pictures. Yeah.
I don't remember Thin Lizzy, though. That's interesting. I had no idea.
This looks way back in the Dandy, because I'm not sure I even recall this when I read the Dandy as a kid. But they all laughed at this one, but the next day we were still trying to come up with a name, but nothing seemed right. So Eric again put forward Thin Lizzy, and they thought, well, what the hell, we've got nothing else. But Eric also changed it to Thin Lizzy, which is kind of weird because Thin Lizzy in that Irish accent sounds like Tin Lizzy.
Thin Lizzy.
Tin Lizzy. So it's kind of like a reverse joke in a sense. You know, they turned tin into thin, but they would still pronounce it tin. Tin Lizzy. So I must check out. I don't think I've got any old dandies left, but you never know. I've got boxes of stuff. If I do, I do not recall that one, but that's where they got the name.
Wow. Thanks for that. I didn't know.
I didn't know either until I read that Brian Downey. Yeah. So we can't talk about Tin Lizzy, without talking about Phil Lynott. Born in 1949, passed away in 1986. Founder member of the band, frontman, singer, writer, bass player, all-round sex symbol, and good guy. Sadly struggled over the years a lot with substances and alcohol and so on, and eventually it succumbed to some of those issues or issues resulting from that. It's such a shame. Phil was born in the West Midlands of England, but moved to Dublin where he grew up with his grandparents and his mother, Philomena. And he loved Dublin. I mean, he absolutely adored it. And contrary to what you might expect with the fact that he was a mixed race, he himself apparently never really experienced any issues with that. He was very popular at school. And he joined, you mentioned, well, that's not Skid Row, this is his first band, the Black Eagles, where he's clearly on the left-hand side there, of course. Look at those fresh-faced kids, eh? That's what bands looked like in Ireland in 1966 or whatever.
That's what it looked like everywhere.
That's right.
Anyway.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Skid Row, Wilco.
Yep.
So that was his first kind of proper rock band, and he was the vocalist in Skid Row. And at various points,
when I met them in '71, I believe Phil wasn't with them.
No,
it was just the three of them.
Yeah, he was. Here's a picture of him when Gary Moore eventually joined, and Phil was still there for a while. And then I can't remember the chap's name, the bass player in Skid Row, who was the founder, wanted to trim down to a trio. So he basically sacked Phil, but he felt so guilty about it, he taught him to play bass, so that when he could start his own band, Phil could be the bassist and the singer, which was a huge move. And he got into playing bass. Yeah, because the guy that founded Skid Row wanted to just cut costs, so he wanted to go down to a trio with Gary Moore as guitar player. So the poor bugger. I know Eric Bell was in Skid Row at one point eventually, and so was Paul Chapman, later of UFO. Yeah. This is not to be confused with the American band Skid Row, which is a different band. So just
I'm not seeing Sebastian Bach there. So
no, very different Skid Row.
As another famous Scotsman might say, in the business, we call this foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing, that's right. Yes, foreshadowing. So there was at least 3 future members of Thin Lizzy were in this band at various points. But the other guy, key guy, was a guy we saw in that little photo earlier with Phil. Was Brian Downey, drummer, born in Dublin in '51, and thankfully still with us today. Brian's still out there touring. Yeah, he's out there touring today with his band. Brian Downey's alive and dangerous. So good for him. But there is so before we talk about Brian, though, there is the debate around how do you pronounce Phil's name? Because for years, like most people would say Lynott. Phil Lynott. Well, his daughters. So yeah, it's pronounced Lynott, according to them. Two beautiful daughters he's got. He married. You'll remember Leslie Crowther, Wilco.
Yeah,
so
the actor.
Yeah, he married Leslie Crowther's daughter.
Yeah.
And he had a couple of daughters himself. I think he's got a son as well, although I'm not sure it's from that marriage. And he's obviously got grandkids now, but Phil Lynott. And there he was, paying attention to what they were saying, throwing himself off the wall. So let me close that down. So actually, I'm going to play a little bit of an interview with Phil. I've got a few clips. We've got some music clips to play later too that I've managed to whittle down for copyright purposes, but we have some interviews, and here's where he talks about his marriage. If I can get this to come up onto the stream. There we go.
Now, what has marriage done to you, Phil?
It's made me faithful to one woman.
So yeah, a little bit bashful there with that one, but he did embrace the rock and roll lifestyle, as we'll find out later. So Brian Downey was the other founder member, friends with Phil in school, was briefly drummer in the Black Eagles with Phil, and then went on to let's form a band with him and Phil. He was an ever-present permanent member of Thin Lizzy through to their breakup in '83, although there was some clips in the montage of the gig in Sydney where Brian Downey didn't play in that tour because he was somewhat the worse for wear. Decided to sit that one out, but he didn't leave the band. He was just taking a break. And he also played in Phil's solo albums and some Gary Moore stuff, and very underrated guitar player. Very underrated drummer. Often when you get these lists of all-time great rock drummers, Brian doesn't necessarily spring to mind, but when you see that Thin Lizzy stuff, he's as sharp as a tack, I would say, as a drummer. Absolutely spot on, and he could adapt very easily from their earlier poppier, bluesier Celtic folk style of some of their material to the hard rock they ended up doing. So, did you ever meet Brian Wilco at all? Or
yeah, met him all.
Yeah, he must have been hanging out.
Great, we're absolutely fantastic guys. I mean, you look at the 70s when the rock and roll just exploded, and for the rock and roll rowdies to be involved with all of this stuff, it was fantastic. It was very proud to be around these guys. But at the end of the day, they were local guys. They were just like, I never looked at any of these guys as big rock stars or anything. They were just like buddies, drinking buddies.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden you see them on stage, you're just like, oh, that's what you do. Okay, great.
Yeah. Well, they struggled a bit. I mean, it wasn't like they became global superstars overnight. I mean, there was quite a few years of hard graft, and
took them a long while.
Yeah, and
it took them a long time.
Yeah, finally broke through. So he in '69 formed a band with Phil, and as you see, he's still going strong today.
Wow, good for him.
You can see lots of footage of him on YouTube with Alive and Dangerous, playing the old Lizzy material, keeping it alive. So good, fair play to him, Great to see. When so many have passed away, guys like Brian are still out there doing it, The third member of the original lineup was Eric Bell, born in Belfast, Northern Ireland in 1947. Had been in them with Van Morrison for a while, and then moved down to Dublin, which probably had a little bit more of a burgeoning scene than Belfast at the time, with Rory Gallagher and a whole bunch of other guys doing stuff. and he founded the band with Phil and Brian, and he was there till 1973. Played on the first 3 albums, and of course the hit Whiskey in the Jar, and he co-wrote The Rocker, which is still one of my all-time favorite Thin Lizzy tracks. He plays a scorching guitar, and I actually saw him live in 1980 with the Eric Bell Band, and he was really, really good. A lot of blues stuff in the act. I think he felt he had to leave in 73 because the lifestyle was getting a little bit too much for him. If you know what I mean. So that was the original trio, and I think I would like at this point to play a bit of that magnificent track, The Rocker. Now everyone knows Whiskey in the Jar, but The Rocker to me is the outstanding track from those first 3 albums, and I'm going to see if I can find the right one here. Oh, there it is.
I said, hey baby, meet me, I'm a tough guy. Got my single outside, wanna try? She just looked at me and rolled down my big eyes. Said, I'll do anything for you. But you're a rapper. You're a rapper. I'm a roller too, baby. I'm a rapper. I love to rock and roll. Yeah, my records have a rock on soul. Rock and roll. Hey boy, you got them old. Oh baby. Ow.
So yeah, that track that remained in their live set for many, many years, albeit with different guitarists. But Eric Bell's one of his finest moments with Lizzy, and there he is a few years later, still with us today, thankfully as well, playing away. Yeah, but that's the original lineup, and pretty, it could be like Cream in another universe, couldn't it?
There's the boys. But hey, listen, Brian, I'm going to jump out of here.
Okay, mate.
I've got this insurance problem with my hand and stuff. I just want to say, being around Phil was just awesome. I mean, to be part of all of his life and seeing him play and having Gary Moore involved. Well, hi, Dustin. I just saw you. It was just part of the marquee speakeasy crowd. It was just so many musicians. It's like, but as I said before, it wasn't like oh God, it's Phil. It was like, yeah, give me a pint, mate. And you go, all right, Wilkie, and just, that's the way it was back in the 70s. It was all these different bands, different band members from different groups. But Phil and Gary, I love them both. I hung out with them forever. And Gary and Phil, what can I say? Love you both. Yeah. And I'll see you, Brian and Dustin, on Thursday. I have to jump out and finalize this insurance stuff.
Yeah, so Thursday, Rock and Roll Rowdies channel. We'll throw up an image of it later in the show. 1 p.m. Mountain Time, noon Pacific, and we'll be doing a little bit of a pre-Christmas show, talk about some Christmas stuff, and just generally chew the fat, as they say.
Yeah, I'll bring my reindeer.
Bring your reindeer. Jingle your balls, your bells, yes.
I'm going to be banging my balls together. Love you all. Give Rock and Roll Rowdies checking out.
Have a good one,
thanks, guys.
Good to see you, buddy. Thanks for being here. Anyway, it's always good to see Wilco and the lads. Please, everybody, go over to Rock and Roll Rowdies. We'll get some links up later and subscribe to those guys. So those early days, bit of a struggle, lots of small gigs everywhere, supporting various bands. Obviously, fashion was a big issue for the band at the time. But they did, so they had the three early albums that Eric Bell played on, probably the best known is Vagabonds of the Western World, but the debut one, Thin Lizzy, which I really do love the cover art for, and then Shades of a Blue Orphanage, Vagabonds of the Western World. I think the main feature of those albums for me, and I do have digital copies, I've never really listened to them that much, is there's not quite such hard rock as later, much more bluesy. A lot of Phil Lynott's poetic lyrics on the songs on these albums, and some Celtic influences. It was still the late 60s, early 70s, so still a little bit touch of that kind of psychedelic era going around, as opposed to straight hard rock, you know. But they then, of course, lucked into, or in their view, from time to time, bad lucked into a huge hit, Whiskey in the Jar, which was a massive hit single in Ireland and the UK. And they kind of, whilst everyone wants a hit, and it got them a lot of coverage and TV, kind of didn't like it at times, because, as Brian Downey said in that interview I had up earlier, you know, everyone then thought we were a folk band. So we'd they'd book us for folk clubs, and we'd get there and get the electrics out and start playing loud rock. And it was like, what is this? You know? So they got a little bit of a genre confusion. It's not gender confusion, of course. No, it's genre confusion through that. But still, you can't go anywhere without hearing this track now. Their version of this traditional Irish song stayed in their set for many years. Eric Bell obviously playing that wonderful lead guitar in it. There's clips of the same clip from the Rocker performance. There was a German show, and they're playing it live on that, and Phil's actually playing a guitar to strum the guitar back. There's no bass in it because it's got a strummed guitar and then that lead. So with only three of them, they struggled, and I think that was in his mind when future events, when he wanted to get two guitarists in. So a bit of a high point for them commercially, not necessarily one that's lasted though, because the albums didn't sell incredibly well even with this hit single. I don't know if it was a big hit in America or not. I mean, it probably was played. Is it something you guys are familiar with?
I'm not familiar with it. No,
only through Metallica.
Yeah,
later.
Right, because we're going to talk about that. They're in the Metallica cover, which in a sense, Thin Lizzy didn't write it. It was a traditional song.
Yeah.
So, but I think Metallica did it because Thin Lizzy did it. You know,
and they specifically covered their version of it rather than the original folk tune version.
Yeah. But there's some beautiful guitar passages in this with brilliant lead by Eric Bell. And then The Rocker, which was a minor hit single, also from Vagabonds, which was the last album Eric Bell was on. I mean, this is a track, if you're not familiar with, check it out. It's brilliant. Probably their hardest rock track from those first three albums. However, Eric Bell's time came to an end. He was knackered, couldn't handle the lifestyle, the pressure, whatever, fought for control of the band with Phil, and it wasn't working. It was Phil was the dominant force. So exit Eric Bell, enter, for not the first but not the last time in Thin Lizzy, Gary Moore, one of my favorite guitarists, and also sadly departed us in 2011, from Belfast in Northern Ireland. Left-handed, but learned to play right-handed.
Was there something about that back then? Because there's a lot of left-handed guitarists that play righty from this period.
There is. There's a few.
Early 70s.
I think we've talked about one or two others in the past. Yeah, but
and it's not an easy thing to do either. It's not like, oh well, if you can't afford a left-handed guitar, you just do this. It's like, no, you already have to be a genius to learn how to do that.
Yeah. So. And yet, how would you know? I mean, you look at him, and I know if we tried to do that, it would be like I mean, I'm a bad guitarist as it is, but to do it the other way around.
Oh, if I was trying to play with reversed hands, it would be immediately obvious to everyone that I'd never done it in my life.
Right. I've tried doing that. I play guitar for years, and you pick up a guitar and flip it over, and your hands just like, what's happening? It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's just like everything is backwards. You're trying to go down the scales and you're going up and all that shit.
So there he is doing that very successfully, and he's such an incendiary guitarist. I think he's one of the longest sustains in any rock guitarist. He loved like 2 minute sustain. He could just stand there and let it do it. I guess you could have a cigarette, have a beer, just like. Came down from Belfast, joined Skid Row, where he was briefly there with Phil, but knew him very well. They'd hung out for a long time. And he was in and out of Thin Lizzy a few times over the years, mainly because he was a strong personality himself and really wanted control of his own stuff. So whilst he was great friends with the guys, he would regularly say, "No, I've had it with this," and leave. Equally, though, when others left, he would join in halfway through tours and finish the tour with the band to help them out, that kind of thing. So he was in and out a couple of times. Joined in when Eric Bell left to finish a tour, and then recorded some tracks which ended up in the fourth album, Nightlife, including the absolute classic, one of my favorites, and there's a great version on Live and Dangerous, Still in Love with You. Now, I don't have the Gary Moore version of that to play for copyright reasons, but I do have a clip of that song I'm going to play now. If it's one you've never really heard, and I'm going to the wrong place to play it. Still in Love with You. Whilst Lizzy are rightfully known for all this great hard rock that they did in later years, Phil could write a really sensitive ballad, and he did it a few times throughout their career. And this is one of the all-time greats, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a beautiful track when you hear it on both on the Nightlife or on Live and Dangerous, extended, slow ballad with lots of really beautiful licks. So Gary Moore contributed to that one, but at the time he only did 2 or 3 tracks on that fourth album, finished the tour with the band, helped them out, and then said, I'm off, I'm out of here, because he wanted more control that he was never going to get with Phil and Phil and Brian's band at the time. So the lesson for that great style these guys have got. The lesson that there's a great picture actually of him with later years with Scott Gorham and Phil. I love the way they used to line up on stage. It was one of the later times he was in the band. So the lesson from for Phil was, well, we need 2 permanent guitarists that are going to stick around a bit longer, and 2 guitar players that are going to take stuff on. So it's what I'd call the first classic lineup of the band, 75 to 78. Scott Gorham entered. So they held some auditions, and one of the guys at audition was an American called Scott Gorham from Glendale, California. I mean, he does look like a Californian, long blonde hair, tall, good-looking guy. He actually was brother-in-law to one of the members of Supertramp, who suggested he try his luck over in the UK, where Lizzy were based in London at the time, getting their career going. And he came over, auditioned, got the gig, and he stayed with Thin Lizzy right through to the end to 83. So he joined 74, was there till 83. And as well as some brilliant guitar work, he formed a really good songwriting partnership with Phil Lynott. And you'll see that on many of their top songs throughout the rest of their career. Now, and there's some great pictures of these guys on stage. Just love that one. Phil's having a snooze. I think he liked to partake in many of the rock and roll lifestyle things that the rest of the band did too, which also endeared him to them. So they went from an Irish band to now we've got a Californian. Lots of great images of him on stage. He really looked the part, you know. Great Les Paul player as well. But then enter the second guy they got from these auditions, one of our old friends who we talked about a few weeks ago on the Motorhead stream. Brian Robertson, Scottish guitarist, born in 1956. Both these guys are still with us, which in Brian Robertson's case particularly is hard to fathom. I'm glad he is. He struck up an instant rapport with Gorham, and they developed that signature twin guitar sound, lots of twin riffs and twin leads playing. Not the only band to ever do it, but one of the first to really press that hard and popularize it.
Which is really hard to do when you've got a revolving door of guitar players coming in and out of the band, because that takes a lot of time playing together and synchronizing with the other guy to get that right.
It does, but they seem to strike up that rapport really quickly, and then obviously touring a lot, they just got right in the groove, and they worked out all their moves on stage, back-to-back stuff and whatever, and then getting the guitars together like that. And both could do lead guitar when required, which was also very flexible. It made it very flexible for them. So Phil finally had two guys that could take that stuff on. He planned to be there for a long time. One of them was. But he brought, as well as that, rapport with Gorham, he brought that more of a hard rock sound in. Excuse me.
I just love, while you're taking that drink, I just love like that twin harmonized guitar. Like, when they can switch between harmonies. Oh, I just love that. It's like one of my favorite things.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, like that's one of the things that makes Priest my favorite, is they were famous for it and do it to this day.
Well, interestingly, the rise of Lizzy was almost to the same timeline as Priest.
Yeah, pretty much. And in some of the same circles too.
They did play gigs together and toured together at various points and played at festival lineups. I wouldn't be surprised these guys all knew each other really well. I mean, very different approach in that Priests are more heavy or harder metal sound, or became that. They weren't starting that way. Thin Lizzy still retained more of a blues hard rock sound.
Yeah.
But same principle, you know, twin guitar licks and riffs repeated with harmony, bringing in harmony then to the guitars.
And you know, him and Rob had to be aware of each other because they were both friends with Lemmy.
Well, that's right, Lemmy, and because Lemmy, as Wilco would testify, was a big part of that speakeasy scene.
Yep.
Which they all hung out in there. They all ate and drank in there and hung out. Lemmy, big pal of Ryan's, big pal of Phil's. So he played on 6 albums. Probably I shouldn't be absolute statements, but probably peak Lizzy. Not that the later albums after he left didn't have some great material, but it was peak era. So you had Nightlife, Fighting, Jailbreak. Here he is with a nice perm. And yeah, as you can see, they weren't. It wasn't just a matter of the sound they had. They knew how to pose on stage.
Yeah,
and we're going to see a little bit more of that. I have another set of montage clips, which I wanted to play longer stuff, but I kept getting copyright. But I've got a few clips of them, particularly from the Sydney gig that Gary Moore was back in the band, where they know how to. It's like ZZ Top. They know how to stand together on stage. I mean, look at that. And look, Phil, of course, had the tight leather pants. He had the bass pointing out, and he had that shiny patch on the bass. He would point at the crowd. Classic lineup, and became much more of a hard rock force and almost verging on the metal. Toured a lot with bands like Status Quo, Slade, and then various American bands when they tried to break over there. So yeah, Fighting, first Brian Robertson album and Scott Gorham album. Jailbreak, the big one that broke them finally in the US to get a big album there and a big hit single, Boys Are Back in Town. Johnny the Fox. And tracks like on Nightlife with Rosalie, which later the live version became big on Live and Dangerous. Great live track. Bob Seger song. Bob Seger, as Phil was saying. An Irish accent. Bob Seger. Here's a track from Bob Seger. I can't do it. Diddly, diddly, diddly potatoes. I promised I wouldn't say that. I'll never say it again on this stream.
Don't make promises.
Don't make promises. Jailbreak, the track Jailbreak. The Boys Are Back in Town, which I think has been... It's one of these songs that's played to death on classic rock radio now, which makes
it's in movies and TV, and it's like the one like Thin Lizzy standard in the United States.
Yeah,
that and Jailbreak.
Yeah, it's the default track that they play on a lot of these things, and there's good reason for that. We forget how good a song it is, particularly live, when they attacked it hard with those twin guitars at the end. But what I like about a lot of these songs lyrically is that Phil was writing a lot of stuff. It was about boys stuff, fighting, drinking, picking up girls, playing rock music. Very macho band, a very boys band, which appealed, of course, to the 14-year-old me a lot. And then tracks like the Cowboy Song, which again was great on Live and Dangerous. Don't Believe a Word, which good shows. I mean, showed Don't Believe a Word and Dancing in the Moonlight, which is a much lighter song. Singles from those albums show Phil's lyrical ability a lot. But yeah, so one of the things from that period, those albums, particularly Jailbreak, started to break through. They got a lot of exposures from Boys Are Back in Town. Sorry, I forgot to say, of course, that Robertson, and we're going to talk a little bit about Brian Robertson, was in and out of the band at least once in that period, although still became a permanent member right through to the end of the 6th studio album in that period. We're going to talk about that because it was quite a famous incident. He suffered a lot from drinking and drug problems, as the rest of the band did at various times. And then, of course, after he left Lizzy, ended up once upon a time in a famous band called Motorhead. So
very, very briefly.
Very briefly for one album.
Fucking hated him.
I think I've heard of Motorhead. They were a small band, weren't they?
Yeah.
Well, if you ask the record labels, yeah.
I quite like that album.
It wasn't their best album, but it wasn't bad. But the fans just apparently never took a liking to him, so he was gone.
Well, he'd be like, yeah, fucking bunch of wankers.
Well, apparently he didn't really go with the whole Motorhead aesthetic. He would just still wear whatever he was wearing with Thin Lizzy, and it was just like, yeah, that's not how this works.
Yeah, exactly. So in this period, they'd started to do a lot of bigger tours, particularly in Europe and Australia. I mean, in America, they were touring with supporting a bunch of bands like BTO, Queen, Kansas, and others. But they released in '76 album Live and Dangerous, which many commentators still to this day say is the best, if one of the best, if not the best live rock album ever. And I have to say, it's certainly near the top for me. It is an absolute belter of an album, distilling their career to that point. All the best songs, and live with a ton of power. with that twin guitar lineup really, really going strong.
Yeah, I
it's a
would
band
easily
at their
put this
peak.
up against things like No Sleep Till Hammersmith or
Yeah.
anything of that caliber.
It is. It's a sound of a band. Excuse me. It knows what it's doing at its peak, and I absolutely love it. And we saw it's difficult to play clips from it because of copyright issues. That's why I've ended up using in the montage clips from the Sydney gig years later with Gary Moore when he was back in the band, as opposed to this era. You can see the concert footage of it, but it's tough to use on here on YouTube. I would recommend anyway, go buy this album, go play tracks like Rosalie, Cowboy Song. They just slay it on those, and the Live Boys are back in town. I do have a clip I can play that is of that lineup playing Rosalie, but it's not the album version that's on this album. I'm going to play a little bit of that just so we can see that lineup performing. It's one of the hardest lineups to get to use on a show like this on YouTube for copyright purposes. And of course, bands in that era, there's not like today when everyone's got their phone and they're recording stuff and you can use a lot of that.
Yeah.
Then it was very limited in terms of what you can use. A lot of it's So that was a live. It was maybe a bit of a lag on that. Apologies if there was. That's a live TV performance by that lineup of the song. So take that and multiply it by 100, and that's what it sounds like on Live and Dangerous. And it's one of my favorite songs of all time. And that performance on Live and Dangerous it brings
back when the BBC was allowed to show cool things.
That's right. And that was actually a live performance. I think we're getting a little bit of lag on I know the internet's been under attack today, apparently. A little bit of a lag on the live stream. My apologies for that. But anyway, so we have a couple of super chats. I would like to get to those now, first of all. And thank you, everyone, for being here and watching and chatting away. And Davina's given us a lot of stuff about the history of the band. Snowda was joining us. Good to see you, buddy, in the chat. Big Dave K, 5 buckaroonies from Big Dave K. Is it me or did Phil Lynott perfect the bass playing pose? The poses in all of those photos are very dynamic. I think you may have something there because I think he really did have a style with that. He did that a lot like this. Now, other guitarists have maybe done it. I'm not sure about bass players, but he had that long-legged stance. I think he may well have perfected that. I don't recall too many others looking like that on stage, So thanks for that, Big Dave. And also we have from our great friend WG, if I can find that one. There we go. $10 from WG. Thank you, my friend. The Sydney Harbour 78 show is how a band should sound live. R.I.P. Philip Lynott. I agree entirely. We had a couple of clips from that in the opening montage with Gary Moore back in the band, and we're going to play a little bit more of that right now in celebration of those two super chats. Thank you, guys. So this is like what I call my backup montage of clips that didn't make the main montage, but we're going to play them anyway. So So let me remove that from the stream. And let's see, I'm going for backup montage. That's the So the backup montage, short clips. I'm afraid I couldn't do longer. But the thing about that is the first ones were, as we WG put it, the Sydney Harbour concert in '78. It's all on YouTube. Go watch it. That is exactly right. That is how a hard rock band should sound. It's full on. They've got the poses. The music's thumping. Brian Downey actually didn't play drums in that one, though, because he was having a sabbatical for various health reasons and other things. But Gary Moore was back in the fold at that point, and what a gig it is. But Live and Dangerous, there's also concert footage from that. I think it was Hammersmith Odeon era. A lot of that was used on that album. It is astoundingly good. It's 70s hard rock at its finest. So,
much like Zeppelin, Thin Lizzy's one of those bands that I wish I would have seen live in their peak.
I know, me too, mate. I was just a little bit young for the early stuff, and then the later era when they were touring, I was unable to go. I was in the military, and just you couldn't always get away to go to stuff, or it wasn't nearby. So, plus I was broke most of the time. So, so I did miss Lizzy, but I did see John Sykes, who was in that one of those clips when he was with the Tigers of Pantang. So, yeah. So I saw that was the later era. You saw Snowy White and John Sykes. We're going to get to those guys shortly. Back to the Brian Robertson era. After Live and Dangerous, there was an incident, and maybe Wilco being here would have been able to talk about it a bit more. So I'll hide this for a second. So Thin Lizzy had a tour of the US planned for December 76. And really, it might have been one that would broke them even bigger in America after Live and Dangerous, but it was cancelled, the tour, because Brian Robertson suffered a hand injury while trying to protect a fellow Glaswegian, the singer Frankie Miller, who's a brilliant Scottish singer, by the way, and Brian Robertson played in his band as well. There was a fracas at the Speakeasy Club in London, which we talk about a lot. Miller had been jamming on stage with another band and was pretty drunk, which is not unusual for Frankie Miller. And somehow he offended somebody in that band, and chaos ensued. This is the story as it's told. We weren't there, we don't know. The guy in the other band attacked Frankie Miller with a bottle in the dressing room. Robertson intervened to protect his friend. And he suffered artery and nerve damage to his hand from the bottle. And then Robertson, though, subsequently in revenge, broke the guy's leg and the collarbone of somebody else. So the whole thing just disintegrated.
Or as Glasgow calls it, Tuesday.
That's right. And then he did the Glasgow kiss on somebody. So then he got hit in the head in the bottle and knocked out unconscious. This is the legend. Whether it was true or not, I don't know. Anyway, Robertson maintained to this day that he wasn't drunk and he just went there for a meal and then ended up protecting his friend. So we weren't there. Who knows? Maybe Wilco was there. So anyway, Hand was knackered. He was out of commission. And so he didn't go on that US tour. Basically, he was kind of sacked from the band. And Gary Moore came back in and did the US tour because he was always coming back into the rescue. Came back in to do that US tour, which was the one where they supported Queen in early 77.
Which there's a lineup I would have killed to have seen.
Queen and Thin Lizzy. I mean, I've got some posters.
Especially at the height of their powers in the late 70s.
What a gig. Like, again, if I had a time machine, I'd be going back in time to go to things like that. So, well, Robertson recovered, but he was kind of allowed back into the fold. So they went off to record Bad Reputation, where I don't think Gary Moore got too involved with this. He was just filling in on tour to help. And they kind of allowed Robertson to come back in and do some stuff on this as a guest. But they eventually allowed him back in as a full member. Excuse me. I think I've got written here that they did the Live and Dangerous tour after this. Maybe I don't know if I got that right or not. Anyway, so there's only 3 of them on the cover here for the album Bad Reputation. But Robertson did contribute some stuff to it. But then he finally left for good in 1978, even though he'd come back as a permanent member for a little while. So Gary Moore then stepped back in yet again, and he joined full time for what became, I guess, like a year and a half. Finally, he was a permanent member of the band. And he did a lot of gigs with them, and also like things like This Is the Sydney Harbour one we just saw the footage of. Great gig. Oops, there's Brian Downey in that era. Because we mustn't forget Brian Downey was still there through all this, permanent member. And they did the album Black Rose, which is a brilliant album. Absolutely love this one. So it's got tracks like Waiting for an Alibi, Do Anything You Want To, and Sarah, which was a ballad written by Phil about his daughter Sarah. But Waiting for an Alibi is obviously a killer track, brilliant track. And some Incendiary live gigs. And I have a clip from that era of Gary Moore with the band playing the song Don't Believe a Word. So let's take a look at that.
Don't believe a word. No, don't believe a word. Please don't believe me. Not a single word.
Not sure if that was Brian Downey in drums. It looked awful like Cozy Powell, but I might be wrong. But that was Don't Believe a Word, which is another song from that era.
It still sounded awesome despite the broken guitar string.
It's right. You can't even bust his string, but yeah, what the hell. But I love the fact that the first half of that track is a slow version of the track, and then they go bang right into the fast rock version. Don't Believe a Word was a hit single in the UK. So it's pretty good, although it was all one pace, the hit single. They really messed with it in there, which is great. So Moore came back, did that, did the Black Rose album, which is one of my favorite Lizzy albums. So Waiting for an Alibi, which is a phenomenal track. If you've never heard Waiting for an Alibi, it's one of their full-on rockers. Brilliant track. There's a Japanese single version of it there. Do Anything You Want To, another great track. And then the romantic, well, I say romantic, it's a ballad about his daughter, his lovely baby daughter called Sarah, and it's cute. It's a cute song, showing they had a lighter pop side still to him, Phil. So
well, I just
then,
want to say thanks for having me on, guys. I gotta bounce and go do some adult stuff, grown up things.
what?
Yeah, I know. I gotta run to the post office and all that grown up stuff.
Oh, you can't do that.
I know, right?
Stay here.
Yeah.
Well,
Are
Dustin,
you gonna
buddy,
protect me?
I know we haven't. I know we haven't kind of let you get a word in very much, but thanks for joining us, mate.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Like I said, I didn't know much about Thin Lizzy. I mean, obviously they are legend, but I'm just not well versed in all their music, and this is a cool peek inside. And like I said, I mean, Boys Are Back in Town. Everybody knows that song, and then the other ones we talked about. I kind of put myself on mute and was listening to some of that, and yeah, I've heard those songs before too. But a lot of the stuff you've been playing tonight, I just didn't know. I mean, it's just kind of comes down to my mom didn't listen to Thin Lizzy. And then a lot of people that I kind of grew up with weren't listening to them, but I really enjoy their twin guitars, like the harmonies, and how a lot of newer bands have picked up on that and ran with it. And I'm really glad they were able to do that. And I think that influence just really goes a long way.
Yeah, they never made it that big in America, other than one or two tracks like Boys Are Back in Town, but their influence stretched beyond hits.
Yeah, their influence hits hard with a lot of music, with a lot of bands, and there's a cult following here. I see people that I know that are huge Thin Lizzy fans, and I always kind of felt like an outsider. I just really didn't know much about them, and so I was really glad, to come on here tonight and get a little bit of schooling, if you will.
Yeah, now if I was to recommend any album, I'd say Live and Dangerous. You get the full-on classic Robertson Gorham lineup, all the rock stuff. Hits hard. Start with that one.
I
you
will
wanna listen to an album. Yeah.
All right, I got to go be an adult.
Okay, mate. Thanks for being
Nobody
here.
wants to grow up. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, everybody in the chat. Have a good night, and I'll see you guys real soon.
All right, take care, mate.
Yep, take care, guys.
So Gary Moore stayed for that 1 year, but obviously he had still his solo career was taking off, and he wanted to take off and do that. So he only stayed for like 1 year. Still a pretty good year because he got one great album and a great tour. And it's not like Gary Moore didn't continue to work with him. We saw Out in the Fields there, which he did with Phil Lynott, a big hit in the UK. A great hard rock track, Out in the Fields, very anti-war thing, fantastic lyric. Parisian Walkways, which we saw a tiny clip of in the opening montage. Beautiful ballad. It's a great, one of the greatest rock ballads ever written. If you've never heard Parisian Walkways, again, Gary Moore's got the whole song is just sustained. Sorry, John, you were going to say something.
Oh yeah, I was wondering, is this the same era that they had the collaboration? That's this Black Rose era. Wasn't it the same era that they had the collaboration with the Sex Pistols?
Well, we're going to get to that for sure, and it is the same.
Did I jump the gun a bit? Sorry.
No, it's okay, mate. You're right. The greedy bastards, or the greedies, as they ended up having to call it. So we're definitely going to get to that.
Talk about two bands with substance abuse issues
colliding. No, that's right. Put them in the same room. Oh dear.
The local drug dealers are on the phone to their friends like, I need backup now.
So the parade of interesting guitarists continued when Gary Moore left, because Phil Lynott was friends with a guy called Midge Ure, Scottish guy, who'd been in a sort of hit glam rock band called Slick, and then was on his way to becoming a new wave guy in bands like Ultravox. And he got a call when Gary Moore left halfway through a tour, and Phil said, "Do you want to come out and fill in for Gary Moore?" Which was a bit of a surprise to Midge Ure, because yes, he was a guitarist, but he certainly didn't see himself as fitting into the Thin Lizzy mold. Short-haired, new wave kind of guy, Here he is on the left here. But he said, "Yeah, I'll do it." And he said he learned the songs on the plane on the way over to the US. Get the tape recorder, a Walkman or something, and he learned them on the way over. He knew the band, and he worked with Phil Lynott on some solo stuff, like his Phil Lynott solo albums, and particularly one track called Yellow Pearl, which ended up being the theme for Top of the Pops in Britain. So it was a bit of a surprising choice, and there's a few clips of him playing live with them on videos, and then he moved pretty quickly after the first tour to playing keyboards because he was getting into that because he was going to be an Ultravox and play a lot of keyboards in that new wave electronic outfit. But I mean, he's a good guitar player and a great musician and songwriter, and he's always looked back fondly on his time with Lizzy. There's a great clip of him on YouTube. It's audio only. They're in Cork, and he plays Whiskey in the Jar, and he plays the lead guitar in it because Scott and Snowy don't know it as well. So Midge comes out from behind the keyboards and plays the lead on it. You can listen to that on YouTube. It's really neat. I've always had a lot of time for Midge here. He's the man that never got the credit for Live Aid like he should have. Bob Geldof took it all. And he's the guy that was behind it as equally as much as Geldof. So, here he is doing the old thing. There's lots of great clips of them back to back with Scott Gorham. It's funny because Gorham's about 6 foot tall and Midge is about 5 foot tall.
Well, Phil's about 6'4" too, isn't he?
Yes. So Midge was a little bit short, but he's a lovely guy.
6'8" if you include the afro.
I'd love to play some of his other stuff, but it's all copyright. He had a great career with various bands, including Ultravox, and he had done some other stuff, new wave stuff as well. But before that, he was in a band called Slick, who were like a glam rock band in the mid-70s, Scottish glam rock band. Here he is in Ultravox, looking very not Thin Lizzy. So the second from the left. Yeah. But Midget Ewer, yeah. But I love Midge. So, and he still does some of the reunion stuff and comes on and plays. And in his own gigs, he'll play the boys are back in town. So, but he's a good friend.
Like Annie Lennox.
Well, I know. I actually like Ultravox. They're a pretty neat band. But he was friends with Phil. He was good friends. Another guy that filled in for a while was a guy called Dave Flett, who was Manfred Mann's Earth Band's guitarist for a long time. And he filled in for a tour as well. But clearly these guys were just stand-ins for tours. And then when there was a few others in the past I haven't mentioned that did stints here and there that weren't, can't mention them all. But well, there's Midge again in his glam rock days. I love him though. He's a lovely guy. So they needed a new guitar player to work with Scott Gorham. So Snowy White joined in 1980 for a while, and he'd done some stuff with Pink Floyd live and whatever, and then went on to have his own career. Again, great guitar player. So I continued that lineage of top-notch guitarists, and he played on some great tracks as well. And they kind of took on a little bit of a different look here, though. It's 1980, they're 80, 81. They're trying to look a little bit more new wave. Skinny ties. So he played mainly on Chinatown, which the track Chinatown is an absolute killer track. But also Killer on the Loose is a killer track from that album.
Yeah.
We've played a little bit of that earlier. Massive track, brilliant stuff. If you've never heard it, you know it, John. You probably know it.
Yeah.
It's Killer on the Loose absolutely rocks hard, and it was controversial at the time because of the subject matter, serial killer and targeting women and whatever. So it got a lot of flack at the time, but it's a rock hard track. Yeah, WG mentioned Gary Beckler was in bass. There was a couple of guys filled in here and there on guitar and bass and keyboards, which I didn't really. Is that Liam Neeson on the left of the Bee Gees? Which one is that in? I don't know which I don't know. We've moved on, so I don't know. Maybe that one he's talking about. It's Midge. It could be Liam Neeson. Sorry, WG, I didn't see it. Thank you for all these chats everywhere. I do try and look at your stuff when I'm doing it, but John can help me throw a few up, I'm sure. So after Chinatown, John Sykes joined, and he really brought a much more of a hard rock feel. So we're now into 82, 83. Sykes had been in Tigers of Pantang. New wave of British heavy metal was going strong. And so...
And honestly, I can hear kind of a sonic connection between Thin Lizzy and Tigers of Pantang a little bit. They're fairly similar sounding.
Yeah, so they are. And Sykes brought a different... I mean, you saw a clip of him playing Cold Sweat live. Much different guitar style from some earlier Lizzy stuff. Much more shredding.
Yeah.
It really invigorated the band, though. I mean, Chinatown was a great album. It had a couple of great tracks in it, but I think Snowy's a great guitar player. But Sykes and Renegade really heavied the band up a lot and invigorated it. I mean, it even looks the part, in terms of a modern, at that time, modern metal, early 80s metal band look. So.
Yeah, or at least some part. It has some of the features of it. Like you saw Phil with the studded leather gloves and stuff like that. It's like that was starting to sneak in. Like you said, it's about what, 82?
82 now, yeah. So also Darren Wharton had joined on keyboards for, I think, the previous album, and he remained with the band to the end on keyboards because Midgear just filled in on that. And he continues to tour with various Lizzy reunion, or it was the Black Star Riders, I think they were called. The sort of in and out of former Lizzy members playing that stuff live. He's still there doing that. But yeah, the look has slightly changed, but Sykes really did bring an interesting connection to the heavy rock of that time into the band. Although Scott Gorham dyeing his hair black is a bit weird.
Makes him look like a weird version of David Bowie in a way.
It does, yeah. So Thunder and Lightning was the last album. And
this seems like something you'd see on a modern power metal album cover.
Yeah.
Well, it does. And if you look at the fist coming out of the ground with the studs, I mean, don't forget Motorhead had been going strong for a few years now. So,
oh, yeah, true.
Yeah. And
I'm actually kind of surprised Eddie Clark never ended up with them after he got out of Motorhead about this time.
Yeah. And Cold Sweat, which we played a clip of earlier, is a really great pounding hard rock track. So whilst these albums had high and low points, the high points were really good. Killer on the Loose and then Cold Sweat are classic tracks. So they were still doing it despite, as the band was coming to an end for personal reasons, for substance reasons, all sorts of things were happening that it just, Phil wasn't going to keep it going. So Phil and Brian decided to split it up at that point. They still worked together. Phil had we don't really want to talk about his solo stuff in detail here, but he had 2 or 3 solo albums and singles, and some of them were very different. Some of them were keyboard, some were more folky, well, not folky, but more about Ireland and Dublin and having more Celtic influence to them. But the one thing that they did do, John mentioned was they teamed up with the Sex Pistols, or at least Steve Cook and Paul Jones, and also a couple of the Boomtown Rats to form the Greedy Bastards. And it's a shame Courtney isn't here because she would love this. And it was an interesting lineup because I think the punks really liked Phil Lynott, and they liked Thin Lizzy. They didn't see them as being like dinosaur rock. They were really club guys on the club scene, drinking and playing, and
even
never,
their stuff in this period sounded pretty punk-like Cold Sweat and stuff like that.
Yeah,
was kind of going down that route. So it's not a surprise the punks would take a liking to these dudes.
Absolutely. And they played a number of gigs, and you can see some footage on YouTube of them. Typically, it would slim down to Lynott, Downey, and Gorham with Steve Cook and Paul Jones. And they even had a hit single. They had a hit single, a Christmas hit.
Yep.
Oh no.
It's in
Called-
my Christmas list of
called-
songs that I play at Christmas.
Yeah.
Oh, this
And
is
it's
going
going
to
to, and it may feature on this show next week when we're going to talk about Christmas songs. But we are going to play a bit of it today. So they had a hit called it was really kind of called a Merry Jingle. It's basically a version of We Wish You a Merry Christmas. I wanted to play the original. Well, I'll say the original. I wanted to play the Top of the Pops appearance because it sings it properly. But this is actually the clip I'm going to play is from a show called The Kenny Everett Show, which was a British comedian and disc jockey, and he had quite a good show in the early 80s. And they changed it to We Wish You a Happy New Year, which kind of fitted too. But this is an early celebration for you all of the festive period. So let's play The Greedies.
Wish you a happy new year. We wish you a happy new year. We wish you a happy new year. Have a happy new year. We wish you a happy new year. We wish you a happy new year. We wish you a happy new year. Have a happy new year. Jingle bells, jingle jangle, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey! Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey! Jingle bells, jingle jangle, jangle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride. Oh, what fun it is to ride. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. So have a happy New Year. Jingle bells, jingle jangle, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Hey! Jingle bells, jingle all the way. Oh, what fun it is to ride. Oh, what fun it is to ride. Oh, what fun it is to ride in a one-horse open sleigh. Wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. So have a happy New Year. Have a happy New Year. Have a happy, happy, happy,
Yeah, I gotta hide that on the stream. How do I do that? There we go. That is, yeah, as WG said, I'm pretty sure this is one of the songs that helped end the Soviet Union. It might have. What I liked about that was the fact that it had the Thin Lizzy twin guitar sound, but with Steve Jones' Sex Pistols riffs as well in the background.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if anyone on that set was sober for that.
I don't think so. I loved the Kenny Everett show. It was great. It was chaos. It was just organized chaos. Lots of great bands on it. He was a disc jockey and a comedian, and had a pretty outrageous act. Pretty outrageous show. But they had all the hot gossip girls who were the dancers they used on Top of the Pops. You saw them there, whatever. But that was great fun, and they did a few gigs with various other people in and out of the lineup. Lovely stuff. In fact, that's actually cocaine, not snow. Well, the same thing, isn't it? Courtney would have loved that, and she's in the chat, and since she's going to come in here, so we're hanging on for you, Courtney. We're hanging. While we're waiting, then for Courtney, I'm going to play a couple more of these little interview clips with Phil from 1981, which is not long after that period. This is what he had to say about his hometown of Dublin, which he was extremely fond of.
I was looking for a place to live in Ireland because, you know, when I moved away, I thought, well, I must come home, you know, because I really suffer from homesickness. If I don't get back to Dublin, not so much Ireland, Dublin, I'm a real Dublin man. If I don't get back to Dublin within 3 months, then I really start to suffer from homesickness.
He did love Dublin. He wrote about it a lot, especially in his solo stuff. It's when you hear him, he's got such a strong Irish accent, you know.
And it does not belong to a man that looks like that.
I know, he's like, it's the weirdest thing. I mean, it's stronger than many Irish accents.
When you see him, you expect him to sound like Jimi Hendrix or somebody, and then he has this like soft Irish accent. You're like, what?
That's right. I was thinking, and I'm going to play another clip in a minute where he talks about Hendrix, but this is him having a bit of fun talking about Irish names, and he's coming up with names for his daughters.
Right,
What are the babby's names?
I have Sarah, which was a song that I had a hit with, and I have a new daughter now called Kathleen, and I'm hoping.
Kathleen. Kathleen. Nice.
I was looking for an Irish name that wasn't too pretentious, you know, like, no, don't get me wrong, anybody who has daughters named this. But you know that, like, when you hear Saoirse or Tara or...
Sinead.
Yeah, it sounds pretentious name. I was looking for a good Irish name. I thought Mary was a bit too over the top, so I thought Kathleen would be nice if you spelt it with a C.
I love that. It takes the piss out, kind of, in a nice way, of this Saoirse or whatever, all these names I can never pronounce that are spelt weird. You know, yeah, he just wanted ordinary names. And then there was one other clip that, if you'll indulge me, where he talks about Hendrix because he was slated to play Jimi Hendrix in a movie. I don't think it ever happened. I don't recall it if it did, but Hendrix was clearly a big influence.
Certainly on his fashion sense.
Yeah, I don't recall a movie being made about Hendrix, but he was supposed to be cast in it.
Jimi Hendrix as an artist was very deep and very involved, and he believed entirely in what he was doing. But as a public figure, he was just like fodder for the media, you know, because he
was a wild man.
Oh, he was. He was like, he indulged in everything, you see. And he died by the way he lived. But as an artist, you can't take it. Well, for me, he was one of my heroes, you know, like he was one of the true inspired. He showed to me that a black fella could be the front of a band and like be completely respected for what he did. And I've to fly to America to do a screen test, not only for the Jimi Hendrix film, there's a couple of films they want me to do now. And ever since, like, I mean, okay, Sidney Pudge's life story.
Sidney Pudge.
You're black, you name it, you know.
Any black guy, they use black, just name it. Yes. That's funny. I don't know. He seems like a lovely, lovely guy. Yeah, it's such a shame that he succumbed to demons, but he left behind, you know, two wonderful daughters there. But yeah, the band really came to an end in '83 after two pretty strong albums, you know, the Chinatown and Renegade. Cemented their, and still good tours, cemented their place in you know, the rock fans at the time pantheon of still bands that could still do it, you know. I gotta share my screen here. But, you know, outside of Lizzy, he did have solo stuff and he did do other things. Continually worked with Gary Moore, as did Brian Downey, of course. They were all pretty close, despite the, you know, in and out of the band thing. Parisian Walkways was a big hit single in the UK. It's a very slow bluesy ballad sung by Phil, and the beautiful, beautiful guitar by Gary. If you've never heard it, go check it out. Parisian Walkways. It's, as I say, it's, to me, it's one of the finest rock ballads ever done. Beautiful, beautiful song. And great, the two of them did it great. Yeah, we're still going, Putin's cat. And this Out in the Fields, which we saw a live clip of earlier, but if you go watch the official video for it, it's got a bit more guitar in it, a bit harder. Very strong anti-war, from the point of view of a soldier, of course.
Yeah.
Song. Hard rock. Brilliant.
And I actually found out about this one the back way because Michael Schenker covered it, and I dug the song, and I dug into it and found out it was actually Gary Moore that did the original. Yeah, Moore and Lynott did the original. It's one of my favorites. Absolutely love it. Played that song to death over the years. He also did this tracks like this Yellow Pearl, which was more of an electronic thing, which he did with Midge-Ure, and as I say, it ended up being used as the theme music on BBC's Top of the Pops, which was the long-running chart show. All keyboards and electronic stuff. Quite an interesting track, though, if you listen to it. Yellow Pearl being a song about the Japanese in World War II. So it's slightly in there, up there with controversy. And albums like Solo and Soho, where lots of guys played, like Gary Moore and Brian Downey and others played. Scott Gorham played on these. And he did other solo albums, which were also had a more variety of stuff, not just the hard rock stuff. Certainly there's stuff about his home city of Dublin and videos where he recorded those songs. That's rude. I know some Yakuza, yeah. I'm glad I don't know any Yakuza, because those guys are pretty fierce. Seen a few movies about them. So one of the things that we talked about earlier was, and you just mentioned Michael Schenker, Pope. So the influence that they had, which I think has endured pretty well. You've got a lot of bands have covered their stuff. A lot of bands have played it live on stage, particularly when they're in Dublin. A lot of the big four and the early, black metal, thrash black metal guys cover their songs and pay tribute to them. So I think those guys were listening, even if in the US, some of the bands. And it was a perfect age for it, right? About 16, 17, going into the late 70s, and right when they'd be forming a band. So that's when these guys were on the radio constantly. And I can easily imagine, a lot of those guys, given the riffage on that song, just hearing the boys are back in town just for a couple of bars and just going, yep, these guys fuck. Going to listen to them forever. And you've even got, like, the cover. I had a picture of it. I don't know what I've done with it. The cover of Anthrax covering Jailbreak. They even imitate the cover with the guys bursting out of jail, and they've completely, paid tribute to that. So, hey, Basco, good to see you. So I've got a clip of some of those covers, all by really, really big metal bands, particularly the first one. The first one is probably the hardest metal band in the lineup. I'm trying to say that with my tongue in my cheek.
So some of the hard rockin' covers, I mean, that Huey Lewis in the News, that's just that's brutal.
I didn't expect that one at all. I didn't. And the thing is, I've seen Huey Lewis in the News in concert, but they didn't play that one.
No, but you know what? Huey Lewis was a good friend of Phil's, and he played on some Lizzy albums. He played harmonica on a couple of Lizzy albums, and played live a couple of times with him, and did backing vocals. He hung out in Britain for years. He was part of the new wave scene in Britain and everything. He's got a much deeper history than people would imagine. And being a friend of Phil's, he was playing that as a tribute to him.
Yeah.
So I thought I had to include that.
And I didn't even need to pick up Undercover before I knew Rosalie would be the one Motorhead would cover, just because I listened to it. I'm like, okay, which Lizzy track, because you know he's going to do one, is like the most Motorhead sounding. It's like, yeah, no, Rosalie, he's going to do
That's
that
right.
one.
He's going to do that, and he did, and it was a great cover. And again, he gets to play tribute to both Bob Seger and Thin Lizzy in one track. Yeah. But we also had we had Anthrax, who did Jailbreak, and their cover aped the Thin Lizzy cover. Megadeth, Cold Sweat. I'm afraid it wasn't a very good. That's the best non-copyright striking copy I could get.
Yeah.
There's a version of that with Zach Wilde and a ton of guys on stage / playing it, but it wasn't very good quality. So, what else was on there?
Metallica, Whiskey in the Jar.
Whiskey in the Jar, which is the big one that everyone knows. Yeah. But yeah,
that video could also be titled "What Are Bands That I've Seen Live."
Yeah. And yeah, Whiskey in the Jar is I like their version. I do like their version.
Yeah,
it's good. Very different, of course, but so their influence lives on. To sum up, I know Courtney was hoping to get here, but we're probably going to wrap up shortly. It's a band that I have a huge appreciation for. Admittedly, it's my era, mid-70s to early 80s, peak teenager. I went everywhere with my copy of Live and Dangerous, except I had it on a double cassette. It was high school parties. That album was on those parties. Strangely enough, Bob Seger was popular at those too. Yeah. So Lizzy were huge, along with the Quo and bands like that. They were a fixture in the British scene, and for a good reason, because they rocked. And they've left a legacy for me of some of the albums are great, like Black Rose, Jailbreak, Live and Dangerous. Some of them are, there's a couple of tracks here and there I could do without. But the body of songs, the good songs, lasts, I think. So yeah, we're sorry you didn't make it, Courtney, but I'm sure we'll be playing. If you can make next week's Christmas show, we'll be playing the Greedies again, I believe. So I would like to thank Phil Lynott, R.I.P. Phil Lynott, R.I.P. to Gary Moore. I'd love to thank them and all the rest of the guys that were in Lizzy over the years for all that wonderful music. I only wish I'd seen you live. I've seen all those guys live in other lineups. I never saw them in Lizzy. Thank you to everybody for being here. I hope you've enjoyed this tribute to a band I felt we really needed to talk about. One that maybe doesn't get quite as much attention as some of the other 70s giants. For me, they're right up there. So thanks to everyone for being in the chat. Thanks to D-Bud, and Davina and others for modding. Any of the mods that were there, D-Bird particularly, you do a lot of modding. Appreciate it, mate. And Davina for the facts that you put in there. Thank you to Wilco for being here, and Dustin too. John, my friend, what have you got going on in the near future?
You can find me Wednesdays and Fridays on on the Pop Culture Minefield channel. I've got a game show that I do video games on. Wednesdays I'm doing Uncharted now.
Oh, you've moved on from Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah. Well, no, I still do that on Fridays.
All right. Okay.
But I was doing Cyberpunk on Wednesdays, and I finished that. So now I've moved on to the Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection.
Nice. Well, yeah, I've watched, dropped in to watch a few of your gaming streams, and you play. Shows me what I should be doing when I play those games,
or what you shouldn't do,
or what I shouldn't do. One or the other. But no, go check out John's channel and check out Pop Culture Minefield. Everybody, great channels, and I really, John, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.
I enjoy being here.
And Hope, my friend, you know you're my internet brother, and I always appreciate you being here. So, what have you got going
on? Thanks for having me, man. It's been great to talk about these guys. Like you say, a band that cast a much larger shadow than they ever get talked about these days.
Yeah.
And they just kind of faded into the background with a lot of other classic rock bands from the period. And I think that's kind of a shame, because it means guys my age never really got the full picture of Thin Lizzy. They're like, oh yeah, they're the guys that did The Boys and Back in Town and Jailbreak. Yeah, whatever.
That's it. That's what everyone knows them for. Or Whiskey in the Jar sometimes.
Yeah, but they're so much more than that. And I really hope a lot of you guys come to check them out, because I mean, they should be the official rock band of Ireland instead of those pretentious wankers in U2.
You did it. You had to mention them, didn't you?
I had to.
If you want Irish rock, in my opinion, you want Thin Lizzy and Rory Gallagher. For starters. So anyway, that's just me.
But other than that, you can find me every Monday on here for It's Only Talk and Roll when we do it. And every Wednesday that we're doing that show on Vinyl Revival's channel. I think this week we're covering Foreigner.
We're doing some Foreigner this Wednesday night on Christian's Vinyl Revival, and that will be fun. I think it's 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. I'll have to check. I think it's 9 p.m. Central, 10 East, 9 Central,
10 p.m. my time,
10 East. Yeah. But yeah, I'll be there for that, because I always talk. I can always talk Foreigner.
Other than that, I'm still on a hiatus with my channel. I just checked my analytics, and apparently a lot of my stuff is getting copyright claimed, even though there's no music in it. So
that's weird.
I got to figure out what's going on that end. So that's up in the air, but if at the very least, I'll probably start to show up again and start pre-recording them and putting them up on Rumble.
Yeah.
At least I won't get bothered by the copyright gods over on this platform.
Yes, it's the weirdest thing, because I get stuff that I've had out for months or even years that all of a sudden up pops a copyright thing, and it's been there for 2 years. But thanks for being here, buddy. WG has super chatted another $10. Thanks, buddy. Really appreciate that. You're a great man. Beer Fund, thanks, man. No, thank you. Thank you very much, and thank everyone else in the chat too. But for you especially, we must play some other kind of video. So which clip are we going to have for our good friend WG today? It's got to be this one. So thank you, WG. Appreciate it, my friend. Thanks to everyone else in the chat. You know who you are. Before I wrap up, I will share one more. I had some posters, and I never got time to share them, but it's worth sharing this one, because we did talk about this, the tour that Thin Lizzy did supporting Queen. This is one of the concert posters from that. The Colosseum. Where is the Colosseum? I've heard of it. But anyway, somebody out there will know, but that's an example of that tour they did with Queen, and that must have been pretty special, I would have thought.
That could be the LA Coliseum.
It could be. Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
Absolutely could be. Yeah. There's another one here, which is Dayton, Ohio. I do love this poster because it's got the Day at the Races album cover on it, and special guest Thin Lizzy. So good times. Right. Well, as for me, I will be later on tonight, probably a bit later on Monday Night Meltdown on Comics Division, where for some inexplicable reason they keep including me in that show, even though I bring the whole tone down. I don't know if we're doing a Toxic Tuesday tomorrow night. I'm not entirely sure about that on Nick's channel. Maybe that's over for Christmas. Thursday, Rock and Roll Rowdies, 1 p.m. over on their channel. We're talking Christmas. I will be on a bunch of other shows, but next Monday on this channel at this time, 3 p.m. Mountain Time, we're planning on a Christmas songs special. So we'll all bring our favorites and our least favorites to talk about. So I need
that's going to be
2
fun.
or 3 for each person, so we can have the best and then we can have the worst. I already have mine lined up, so I just got to get clips and pictures of the sleeves of those records. I know that what my number one worst will be, and it's not one person, it's one artist, and it begins with an M, and the second name begins with a C.
That was my number one worst one too. So.
And it's not MC Hammer.
Song could
No.
be brought up in The Hague.
And it's not MC Hammer.
Nope.
So that could be a lot of fun. I hope everyone will join us for that. And you can put your own suggestions in the chat there, and we'll try and address those. But we'll have our best and worst of rock or Christmas songs. The best for me will be all rock ones. Some of the worst might not be rock ones. Until then, have a great week, everybody. Take care, stay well, and keep on rocking. Most importantly, keep on rocking. See you next time.